Good morning. My name is Patrick Allen, and I'm an interviewer for the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. And it's done here in Southwest Ohio under the auspices of the Cincinnati Hamilton County Public Library under the direction of Brian Powers. And today is June the 13th, 1 week after D-Day 1944. And we have the privilege of having an interview with Ralph Mutzner. Mr. Mutzner, thank you for doing this interview.
Thank
Do you go by any name other than Ralph?
No, just Ralph.
Just Ralph, okay. Ralph, can you tell us where and when you were born?
I was born in Covington in 1936.
Covington, Ohio?
Covington, Ohio. And December the 20th, 1936.
And what were your mother and father's names?
Charles and Ruth Mutzner.
And your mother's maiden name was what?
Bodemiller.
Bodenmiller?
Yes, yes,
Was your father from Covington?
yes.
And how about your mother? Where was she originally from?
She was from Covington also.
Okay.
Covington area.
What'd your dad do?
Farm, he was a farmer.
And Covington is in Miami County.
You're right.
That's county north of Montgomery, Dayton, Ohio.
Correct.
How many acres did he farm?
Well, at one time we was up to 320 acres
All right.
when I was still in high school.
And you could still help on the farm?
Oh, yes.
What all did you do on the farm and helping Dad?
Well, we plowed, worked around, planted corn, and run the combine, harvesting wheat and oats, and shelling corn, and run a crop dryer. Dad was working with Hartzell Propeller to develop grain drying systems
Well, Hartzell Propeller, where was that located?
in Pickway, Ohio.
And that is the town just east of Covington?
Yes,
Route 36, is that?
right, about 7 miles.
What did he do at Hartzell?
Well, he never worked at Hartzell, but they came out and worked with him, the engineer, to develop the crop drying system. So they made a batch dryer where they put the corn in, hold about 100 bushel on, with a fan and heat on it to dry the corn and dry it down and be able to store it.
That sounds interesting. About what year did they do that?
Well, we was doing that in 55, I think it was.
Okay. How about your mom? Did she work outside the home at all?
Well, later years after my brother and I, of course my sister was the oldest, my brother was the next, and I was the youngest. So by the time we got out of high school, she went to work in Pickway at a paint store, which then was Pickway Paint, which don't exist anymore. But
She was the secretary there, I think
Yes.
you told me. All right, let's talk about your brothers and sisters. Where did you fit in the scheme of things? You were the youngest?
yes, I was the youngest.
And who was the oldest?
My sister,
And what was her name?
Mary Louise Mutzner.
And is she still alive?
Yes.
What's her married name?
Mills.
Mary Mills?
Yes.
That's the same as my wife. She was a Mills from West Virginia. That's ironic. Does Mary have any children?
Yes, she had a daughter and a son. The daughter's in New York working for Methodist Ministry worldwide, whatever. So,
New York City?
yes,
And her name is Ellen?
yes, Ellen
And how about your son? Where is he?
was Doug DeWeese, and he farms 2,300, 2,500 acres, him and his boy.
And where do they farm? In Miami County?
Miami County, Spring Creek Township, and boy, it all the way down to Troy, so I don't know what, maybe Staunton Township and Washington. Washington Township, so.
And his name?
Douglas.
Okay. Now, he's got a lot of acreage he farms, but does he rent that from other farmers, or does he own all that?
I think he probably owns 2/3 of that.
Good.
Him and his son, about half and half of what they own. They do rent some, but
So, what's your other brother's name?
Charles,
Charles Jr.?
yes,
And I understand that he passed away,
yes, 2 years ago,
and his age when he died was what?
85,
And your sister's age now?
89.
Well, were you born in Covington, or were you born in Piqua, or where were you actually born?
Well, they said a little hospital south of Covington at that time in those years.
Is it still existing?
Well, I think it's a rental property now, maybe.
All right. So, where did you live, right in Covington, or your dad's farm was where in relation to
Well,
downtown?
we just lived out of Covington about a mile and a half on what was the McMacken Road, which was on the other side of my granddad's farm.
What was your grandfather's name?
David.
How many acres did he farm?
Well, you end up with 120 acres.
And what was your grandma's name?
Jeanette Wade.
And that was on your dad's side.
Right.
How about your mom's side?
Well, Henry and Sarah.
Henry Mills?
No,
What was?
Bodie Miller.
Oh, that's right, Henry Bodie Miller. Sorry about that. Okay, so you go to grade school in Covington?
Yeah, for 2 years, and then we moved and bought a farm up on Pickwick Clayton, right on the edge of the school district, Washington Township and Newberry Township, which was a county school. So we went to Washington Township till the 8th grade, and township, or the county, had to pay tuition to go to high school. So we decided to go back to Covington because it was smaller.
Okay. Now, the first school you went to for 2 years, was that single classes in a room, or were there more than one class in the room?
Well, there was a single class in the room, but we had two rooms. And the first grade was 2 rooms, all the grades was 2 rooms.
Okay.
When we got to Washington Township, there were 2 classes. I started overflow, so I was in the 2nd and 3rd, and then I went 3rd and 4th, and 5th and 6th, and 7th and 8th. Our class of Washington Township had a whole total of 13 students. So.
Well, when I was in grade school, in 7th and 8th grade, we had two classes in the same room, which was not exactly ideal. When did you graduate from Covington?
1954.
What did you do? Well, let me go back. While you were in school, you're still helping your dad on the farm.
Oh, yeah.
Did you have any time in high school or grade school to play sports?
I played football
In high school?
in high school,
How many years did you play?
3 years.
And what position did you play?
Guard in the line, so.
Good. And back in those days, what was it, a county, were you in a county league?
Well, it was I don't know if you'd call it a county league, because at that time, we went into Montgomery County, a couple schools, 3 schools down there, and we went to Dark County and All Glaze County. So at that time, the Covington had football before the war, and somebody was killed, and so they stopped football, and they started again in 48 or 49, somewhere in there.
Now, was somebody killed playing football?
Yes.
How'd that happen? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't remember. And we had came back from Germany, so it might have been 59 or 60, we had another boy that ended up being killed, but they said his brain was like an 85-year-old. So it really wasn't as much as a football as much as the pressure on his head or whatever.
Okay. So, after school, after you graduated, what did you do?
Well, I was only 17, so I had to wait until I was 18 to work in any place that worked 40 hours a week. So I ended up going to Miami County Dairy, and because of chances of being drafted to go in the military, the industry really didn't want me because I'd be going right away. So I worked at the dairy for a year and a half until I volunteered draft and went in the Army and spent 2 years there. Most of it was in Germany.
Well, let's talk about the Miami County Dairy. That's not in business anymore, is it?
No, it's not.
I think I remember having ice cream at that dairy. Did they sell ice cream to the public?
Oh yeah.
And what did you do working at the dairy?
When I first started there, I was making ice cream bars and that stuff, and opening came up in the milk department, so I went up there, which paid more, and I ended up being what they call the milk processor, which I helped process the milk, homogenize and pasteurize, and we separated the cream out, and I also made the mixes for ice cream. So we pumped back to the back end. So.
Did you make more money as a milk processor than fixing ice cream?
Yes, but that was 60 hours a week, and ice cream was only 40 hours.
So how much did you get paid an hour as a milk processor?
Well, I ended up to $1.25 an hour. I started in the ice cream part at 85, and there like a year and a half, whatever, something like that.
Now, were you able to keep your earnings for yourself, or did you have to help support the family?
Well, I could keep it for myself, but I had an automobile. I sold a couple steers in order to buy an automobile when I was graduated. Then by working at dairy, I could buy me a new automobile.
What's your first automobile? What was that?
It was a 51 Ford.
And what was your second automobile?
55 Ford with a 56 engine in it.
All right. But you bought that new?
Well, brand new. Beaver and Howman just started up their Ford dealership in there, and they were two brother-in-laws. And so I actually bought the one off of Max Hallman, which was his first new car he sold. And my buddy had bought their other first new car that they sold, and Bob Beaver was the salesman on that. So.
And was that in Covington?
Yes, that was in Covington. They was just like along the high street there. Eventually they moved into a bigger place and a bigger dealership. They had that, I don't know, 15, 20 years maybe. But when I went in the Army, I had to borrow money to buy the car. And I told the banker, I will talk to the banker to get the loan, and I said if I had to go in the Army, I'd sell the car, and he told me I didn't need to, that I wouldn't have to make a payment till I got back. I didn't have to sell the car, but I didn't know where it was going to go, and I couldn't take the car with me, so I sold it anyways.
All right. So after 18 months with Miami County Dairy, you say you volunteered for the draft?
Yes.
And why did you do that?
Well, my brother was 2 years older, so the family idea was he would go in and get his 2 years over, then I would go. And he changed his mind about going in, so I went. So I figured I could get in and out by the time he'd have to get drafted. But by the time I got a year in, he volunteered to go to the reserve at Troy. So he spent 6 months in the reserve, and that time Dad put everything in the soil bank. So the foreman was done for 5 years.
I made a note here that you got drafted, but you enlisted, right?
Well, it was actually had my date moved up.
All right. But technically, you were drafted?
Yes,
All right.
that's
and
it. The U.S. before my numbers. Otherwise, if you volunteered, it was like ER.
So I've got your entry date as August the 13th in 56, is that correct?
Correct.
And where did you go to sign up?
Went to actually to Fort Thomas in Kentucky, just across the river from in Cincinnati.
How'd you get there?
A bus out of Troy, Ohio. And then we flew from there to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas.
So is that where you did your basic training?
Yes, sir.
How long was basic?
Well, 8 months or 8 weeks, but then we had 2 weeks to orientation before basic started, so it actually ended up being 10 weeks. First 2 weeks was to get your hair cut and to get your clothing, which was 1 piece today and 1 piece tomorrow, and stretch everything out, and then start getting your,
Did you have to get shots?
yeah.
Now, after that 10 weeks, did you get a chance to come home?
Yes, I was able to come home for 10 days after basic.
How'd you get home?
Well, there was a group of us from Ohio, and we chartered a plane out of Columbus, or out of
Louisville?
Fort Smith, Arkansas,
Okay.
and flew to Columbus, Ohio, and got out of there. Of course, everybody was ready to get out, and before the plane get up to the airport property where we could get off, I know we just opened the back door and we grabbed our stuff and got out.
And then how did you get back to Covington?
Well, folks came over and picked me up in my automobile.
Did you have a girlfriend at the time?
Yes, I did. I had her in junior in high school, right after I turned 16.
So you had this girlfriend when you went in the Army. Did you stay with her?
Yes, I did.
She become your wife?
Yes, 4 days after I finally got back home from Germany.
Her name was what?
Suzanne Schilling. Mutzner.
Schilling?
Yes.
All right. So while you were in the Army, what did Suzanne do?
She worked at personal loan department at the bank,
What bank?
the Citizen National in Covington. She really liked that, meeting people.
Yeah, good. So from Arkansas, where'd you go after basic?
To St. Louis, Washington, a combat engineer. And
So is that something you wanted, or did they just plug you in there?
well, first off, 4 weeks, 5 weeks in basic training, they called us in, decided where you was going when you got out of basic, and I said, well, I wanted to go to airborne to jump school. They said, no way you're going there, so don't even think about it.
Why?
They never told me why.
Okay.
And I said, well, then where do you think I should go? Well, you need to go to officers training school for 6 months. I said, well, what does that pertain? Well, you had to take another year. I said, well, I won't take another year, but if I make an officer, I will take it then. No, you got to take it before you go. Well, I said, I won't going to do that. So, what's your other choice? And I said, well, how about combat engineer?
Now, what gave you the idea to be a combat engineer? Something you saw, some advertising or some movie, or what was it?
Well, some of my relation had been combat engineer with engineering, so I thought maybe that might be. I didn't want to go infantry marching all the time.
All right.
So I figured if nothing else, I could learn more. And by the time I got to Fort Lewis, and I trained for combat or for demolition experts. And so I'd done that, and at the same time, I did get licensed to drive a vehicle.
All right. No, but you already had a driver's license. What else did you need to drive a vehicle for the Army?
Well, you had to have a military driver's license.
How long did it take you to get that?
Well, just to take the test, it took me, maybe in order to do the test, it was supposed to be called, they call it the California driver's test. The written test, if you could pass that, well, you get your driver's license, military driver's license.
Okay, what'd you learn to drive?
Well, I ended up at what they call a deuce and a half, was 2.5 ton dump truck, and plus was able to drive the Jeep, and of course I could drive most anything, and one time I drove the mess truck from our compound to where we were doing work training in Germany. So I run them up there, and then they haul me back so I could run in the convoy.
Well, did you go to Germany from Washington?
Yes, we got on a train in Seattle and trained all the way on the train to New York City.
How long did that take?
About 5 days.
Was that a military train or was that the regular public transportation?
Well, we had our own mess hall in there, so I'm really not sure whether it was military or public.
What kind of sleeping accommodations did you have on the train?
Well, they was bunks at 2 or 3.
2 or 3 high?
Yeah,
And which did you have? You up or down?
down. I didn't like height. That's why I didn't go in the Air Force.
Okay, so you get to New York City after 5 days, and well, before you get to New York, did you have any stopovers anywhere?
We had a stop at Helena, Montana. 6 below zero, we had to get out to calisthenics.
6 below zero?
Yeah.
Did you have winter garb?
Well, no, we didn't have one. But then that only took an hour, and then we're back in and rode the rest of the way to never stopped to New York.
An hour and 6 below zero?
Yeah.
You probably felt like you were an ice cube.
Yeah.
So you get to New York City, and how long were you in New York City before you were
Well,
shipped
we
out?
went right on the ship. Well, they called it a ship. I called it a boat.
Okay.
It was a merchant marine ship. It was a 2-stacker.
All right, what else, what did they carry besides troops, anything?
Well, all I could tell was just the crew members and the troops. Our whole battalion, which was 4 companies, A, B, C, and D, and headquarters.
About how many troops were on board then?
Oh, that'd be over 600.
How long did it take, where did you go in the ship, in the boat?
Well, clearing the bottom where we bunked. And of course I took the bottom bunk, which probably wasn't the best idea, because some guy at the time they got on the ship, they was already vomiting seasick.
Oh, Lord. You certainly wouldn't want to be up above when somebody was doing that.
Yeah.
So, how many days were you on board ship?
Well, we was out 3 days, and both the engines had went out. So we bounced around like a rubber ball for a night.
So you're dead in the water?
Yes. Then they finally got one of them started to go back into New York City and worked on that for another day or so. They got both of them running, so then we went back over. So actually was on the boat 15 days time we got to Bremerhaven, Germany.
Did you have any stops between New York and Bremerhaven?
No, but the ship was zigzagging because it was considered a military ship. So we couldn't go just straight.
Back during the war, that's what they had to do to
Right.
try to avoid the submarines.
We got close enough to Iceland or Greenland, I guess, because we had a bunch of big old floating icebergs out there. We thought,
What did you do on board ship while you were traveling those 13 days?
well, I didn't want to stay in the bottom where everybody was vomiting, so I volunteered for, I called it the mess hall, but I think Jim would tell me it's probably the gallows. And went up there and, well, shoot, I was help cooking. I'd make desserts and peel potatoes and anything to get out away from guys all vomiting all the time. And so,
Did you do that most of the time while you were on board ship?
yeah, most of the time, but then in the night I end up with guard duty. I had to sit out on the deck, walk out on the deck or hang on to the rail or on the deck or whatever to keep them falling off the side when they're flip-flopping, but
So where in the Atlantic was the worst weather as you were going over there?
about 100 miles off of New York City. Because we had a storm come up. I don't recall it raining that much, but just blowing and the water was so choppy that it weighed probably 20, 25 foot waves and no power in it.
Oh, jeez.
So the front end would go up and then it'd come down and crack. I thought it was gonna crack in two, and then it would roll one side. You'd be seeing the stars, and the other side you're seeing nothing but water, so it'd go back and forth and up and down. And
Did you ever get seasick?
no, I didn't.
Did you take anything to keep from getting seasick? Or was
No, I
that-
didn't.
So it was just your nature, you were able to handle that without any problem.
And no, there's a few of us never did. And the funny part about, they said, you know, when you see seagulls, you're getting close to land within 100 miles. So as we were getting closer to France, we could see the seagull. And so for supper we had, for some reason or other, we had corn. And a guy from Chicago and a couple other guys, and we're outside and sun was shining in the evening, and all at once this one guy, he thought, well, that's some corn on the side of my face, and it was seagull poop. So he vomited, and he had made it all the way in that vomiting. So,
Well, you say you got close to France, but you say you landed in Bremerhaven.
so we went up the English Channel,
Okay.
seen the white cliffs of
White
Dover.
Cliffs of Dover?
Yeah.
What'd you think of those?
Well, it was just a big old white wall.
How was the surface of the sea between England and France up the channel?
Oh, it was smooth up the channel.
Now, when you got, Bremerhaven, if memory serves me right, there were a lot of German U-boats that came out of there, and it was pretty well bombed. What was Bremerhaven like when you got there?
It was pretty decent, of course, the seaport, and
Rebuilt?
yes, it was rebuilt and got on the train and trained down to Kitzingen, Germany.
How do you spell that?
I knew you'd ask that. Kitzzen, I think maybe.
Where was that in relation to Berlin or any other large
Well, it's
city?
in East Germany, which was south of Berlin, and southeast of Berlin. Warsaw was the bigger town there
Warsaw, Poland?
in Germany.
Oh, okay.
And so there, that was built up pretty good. They had new bridges that had been bombed out and whatever. And of course, part of my being a demolition expert, I was cleared classified for how to blow that bridge up if war came, and if we had to retreat, we could blow that up before the enemy came across. But
What was the name of the base where you were located?
I can't really tell you anymore. The amazing thing, I was there for 10 months, I think it was. And my daughter, years later, was a state FFA officer in Wisconsin. And after her year's tour, the team got a chance to go to Germany for 6 months and live with German family. And so her and her girlfriend's brother was stationed where I had been stationed when I first got to Germany, so they got to go down and see the base where I was at when I was in Germany.
Was that still operational?
Yes, it was still operating.
All right.
We were there about 10 months and we moved to Schaffenburg, which was closer to Frankfurt, about 20 miles from Frankfurt.
So what activities did you engage in at your first base?
Well,
Besides
basically
learning demolition, what else did you do?
build bridges, learn to build bridges. And they call us a bridge company, so we practice building bridges. And we was on an air base, so we had to, I don't want to put it, our demolition for the whole outfit was out on the corner edge of the air base. So we had to stand guard out there, and probably about an acre or so was all fenced in. Or we was on there with a tank outfit, which they was there before we got there. So that created a little problem. They didn't like new guys coming in, or they wanted to be the boss, but whatever. But we survived. When we went to Schaffenburg in late November, we were new kids on the block up there. And see, I thought our outfit was pretty hand-picked, because most of us, I'd say 75% of it was Midwest guys, knew how to work, and of course with building bridges, that heavy lifting or whatever. They did make a few in from Detroit, probably to help keep them out of trouble, in Chicago. So we would, but majority of it was Midwest and country boys and whatever, so we mixed pretty well together.
Well, you're only 20 years old at the time, weren't you?
Right.
Yeah. When you practice your demolition, what are you using?
Well, we had 5 or 6 explosives. We had what we call a post hole digger, which was about so big around it would drill a hole, or blow a hole, dirt out the hole. And we had some CO2 compound, and we had TNT, and we had another with like a cord. We could wrap it around a tree and cut the tree off, or we could wrap it around steel and cut the steel in two. So all that was and also dynamite. So,
Well, did you actually build any bridges that you demolished for
no,
practice?
we didn't. No, we didn't. We built them for practice and whatever. And of course, after we moved, was closer to the Rhine River. So we went to the Rhine River and at one time and built a pontoon bridge across the river. Of course, we had to do it on Sunday because Rhine River was a commercial traffic. So the boats had to quit running on Sunday. So we had to put the pontoon across on Sunday so we could drive across it, and that put us into France. And by being a truck driver, we had to let the air out because we're running on sand. All the tires ended up so we could. And so once we got across the bridge, the pontoon bridge, then we had to pump the tires back up so we can get back up on the highway by that. So part of it.
So you built the bridge and took the pontoon bridge down in one day?
Well, the other company, we spent a day building a piece of, it was 2 sections at a time. And they had a cable probably 1.5 inches or so long, or big around. And with the tugboat, they took it upstream for a mile before they crossed because the current was, in the Rhine River was 13 knots. And Navy people understand that more than I did, but by the time they get up a mile upstream and get across, the cable was about where we needed on the other side, and fastened and anchored it over there so we could hook all the sections of the pontoon to that cable to anchor it.
How wide was the river? A pretty wide river.
Well, yeah, it probably was close to half mile.
You have any idea how many sections of the pontoon bridge you had to put together?
Well, there was 6 or 8 of them at least.
And how long was each one? How many pontoons were in each section?
Well, there was 2 in each section, so they were probably 20 feet each section, or each half section. They probably about 40 feet, so
And the surface that the trucks came across on, was that wood?
no, that was steel,
Steel?
yeah.
So when you got to France, then what did you do?
Went down the road and found another bridge and came back into Germany. We didn't come back out. We left that for B Company to tear down.
All right. So did you spend any time in France, or was it just
No.
over and then another bridge and came back?
Just come back, yeah.
When you were in Germany, did you have any communications and contact with any of the German citizens?
Oh yes, quite a few of them. They were pretty well fluent in English.
And how'd they treat you?
Well, they, as a whole, I'd say 99%, just they really were glad to see us.
Mm-hmm.
Which a lot of them had during World War II, which they wasn't in favor of the war. And any of our guys that happened to escape capture and that, they would hide them to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they didn't like Russia at all, and he really didn't care for Hitler, and of course what he had planned that for years and years, to have his army big enough to take over.
Take over the whole Europe.
Yeah.
Did you meet any former German military personnel?
Well, at one time, and this guy had been in World War II, and he was not friendly at all because he had got injured and he still blamed the Americans for it.
Uh-huh.
But they were Wild Flicking, which was on the border of the Iron Curtain, and on top of the mountain, you look down the other side, and the Russian troops were practicing down there. So that's how close we was. But we had the United States had a tank outfit that was on the border. But we would go up there to Wild Flicking, which was hilly country and training for artillery and the tanks and that. And of course, they might shoot their target and hit the road and leave a big hole in the road. So we'd go patch up the road and maybe take some stones out or cut some trees down. So we always spent about 3 weeks, 2 or 3 times while we was over up there. And so the last time up there, Germany was just starting their army up. And so they had a regiment, or at least a company, of young Germans up there. And so they were real nice with us and showed us all their weapons they had. And of course, they had the state-of-the-art weapons then compared to what we had. But they were friendly, and they showed us everything that they had. And of course, like I said, they about all could speak English, so it was not a problem communication with them.
Uh-huh.
But Germany, kids would go to school 12 years, but they went year round. So basically, by the time they got done with their 12 years of school, they had a college education. So they were far more educated than what we were in the United States.
Well, I had a friend that was in the 5th Cav over in Germany in the mountains, and he talked about a pass that they had to guard where if the Russians were going to come through, they would come through that pass. Were you anywhere near something like that? And I can't remember the name of it.
Not that I remember of. Nothing was ever mentioned that, but the cavalry was on the line, basically on the line.
Did you get into town much over in Germany?
Yes, our PX was in town, which is like a block and a half from our barracks. And so, but then in Germany they had a lot more bars than the United States had filling stations. So to get to the PX, you had to go by at least 4 bars on the main drag, and then if you take off a side street, there was nothing there. But we had to go down the PX to get all of our groceries if we needed any toilet articles or cigarettes or stuff like that. And so,
Did you have to stop at any of the bars to refuel yourself?
well, yeah, that always was a problem. So. But I found one right across from the gate to go in there, and was just a small bar. Maybe it would hold 20 guys, and nice people, and the barmaid in there. And so first time I was in there, she came over and sat with her, and I told her, I said I wasn't interested in any women because I was getting married when I got home, so don't expect me to be messing with you. And come to find out 6-8 months later, she'd already had a kid about 2 years old because somebody got her pregnant when she was 16. So she wasn't interested in men.
Was it a soldier that impregnated her, or just one of the German?
I have no idea. She never said.
So how was the beer over there in Germany?
Well, it's real beer.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, what we were drinking was at least 18 to 20% alcohol.
Really?
So it wasn't all that filler that we had here. But the bottle had to be a pint, but it had I call it a gallonized, like your old canning jars that had your metal to hold the lid on the rubber.
Okay.
Well, that's what, and it had a rubber around that to seal that, which it practically would never freeze. If it did freeze, it wouldn't explode when you open it up. But they said anything that 12% or below, they put a regular cap on like we had here. And so, but you could drink 3 or 4 of them a night and not be drunk because it didn't have all that filler. Didn't have a hangover. So at one period of time, we was up at Wild Flicking, and there was a monastery up there. It was the spring of the year. And one of the guys asked for permission if they could get me to haul a load of guys up there to go through. The monks run it. There were 3 monks who was running it to go up there, and it was a tourist attraction. They wanted to go up and see it. Well, yeah, they got permission, so up there we go.
So what did you go in?
My truck.
Your deuce and a half?
Yeah,
All right.
we could put a whole squad in the back end. So 15, 18 guys in the back end. So went up there, and of course we got there and the parking lot wasn't full, so I thought best to back in so I could drive straight out instead of with cars coming in and trying to maneuver to get out of there. So we went in there and we looked through the monastery and all the things that they had, the monks. That was the way the monks raised money to do their training and all that. And spring of the year, and they had Bach beer. And supposedly, if you never had a glass, you had a mug. So the mug probably held a pint. And the story was if you could drink the second one, they would give it free. Well, you got that stuff and it was just as black as coffee and had a head maybe a quarter inch on top. It went down just like milk. With no problem at all. And so I'm gonna go get my second one. As I got up off the stool, my ears started ringing and all that. No, it'd be no more. So that took care of that. Of course, it cost a whole quarter for the first one.
A quarter?
Well, see, the Dutch mark was four, how'd they call it? 4 and 2 penny. So to make $1. So basically their dollar was a little bit less than our quarter. So we're buying beer for a quarter. So $1, you could go out on the town for $1 for the night and get by with it. Of course, we got.
But with the Bach beer, you could only handle one.
Well, yes, that was enough. And so we ended up.
Were you able to drive back?
Well, yeah, that's why I had it lined up to just go straight out and right down the hill back to the barracks. And of course, this was on a holiday, so well, it could have been Memorial Day or 4th of July, one of them. So we go back and we eat, and so then a bunch of us decided to go to the M Club to kill the rest of the day.
Now, what was the M Club?
Well, for enlisted men.
Okay.
You couldn't go to the officers club.
Okay.
So we went down there and at one time or another, my buddy and I went down there and I heard this voice. Boy, that sure sounded like that guy from basic training. And sure enough, it was. And so I talked to him. He had gotten in a fight in basic, so he was held back until that was settled through the courts and that. And so he ended up eventually got in with Germany. He was a different outfit, but whatever. But it was just kind of surprising to have somebody in basic training that I knew that ended up over there.
So besides learning how to build bridges and practicing demolition, did you do anything with airstrips, air bases?
We did build an airstrip a couple of months before we came home. We had to haul sand in, put it down, and it had this, I thought it was aluminum, maybe 20 feet long and maybe 2.5 feet wide, and to interlock them together to put them down over the sand. And for small engine airplanes, I don't know, maybe fighter planes could land on it, but I don't think big
bomber could.
Big bomber would.
So after your second station in Germany, where did you go?
Schaffenburg, which is about 20 miles from Frankfurt, more in the center part of it.
How long were you in Schaffensburg?
Well, we got in there last in November, 1st of December, was there until August.
What did you do in Schaffensburg? Same thing you'd been doing?
Yeah, same thing. The odd part about our replacement, when we were supposed to come home, there was a Marine killed down in Lebanon. So, probably with the start of Vietnam, so the guys that still had a year to go, they pulled them off. We're gonna send them down there. But they got that taken care of, so they didn't end up going down there, but then they flew them back to the States, and they beat us back to the States, because the ship we were supposed to come back on, they used that, had that to take the equipment and stuff down there to Lebanon. So that held us back.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the troops that our replacement came over on that ship, and ironic, went to the mess hall one night after they got there, and two guys ahead of me, one of them I graduated high school from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So did you have a good little reunion with him?
Oh, yes, oh, yes. But
How was the food on base over in Germany?
well, was real good. We had real good cooks, and most of them seemed like the Chinese, which was American Chinese, but they were doing that to get their citizenship, go in the military 2 years. And we had a couple of Germans in our company too that had joined the military for 2 years to get their, was able to get their citizenship in 2 years instead of 5. And so the Chinese was the same thing, and about all of them was cooks.
So the Germans were young boys.
Yes, oh yeah,
Did you talk to them at all?
oh yeah, yeah.
Had their dads been in the war?
Well, I would assume they was, because at that time with Hitler, any male that was born had to go in the military, which is trained strictly for the military.
But you didn't talk to them about that?
No, no.
So when did you learn you were coming home?
Well, about the 20th of July, and they are big shots in the battalion. We're trying to make rank. So he's holding us to the last minute. But then that backfired on him because it cost him, well, I ended up in 8 days longer, and the guy that went to Chicago to muster out probably within 10 or 12 days longer.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had trained at Chicago, where I got off the boat and went to Fort Dix, me and another fellow from Ohio, and all the rest of them went to Chicago's Fort Sheridan.
So why'd you go to Dix instead of Chicago?
I don't know, that's where they sent us.
Okay. How long were you at Fort Dix?
We got in there Saturday morning, got out Wednesday evening. Turn in stuff, one piece a day, one piece a day. Of course, they re-out all day Saturday. So the one fellow with me in Germany from Ohio, and that, well, per chance we got, we grabbed a pass and we went to Philly to get the hell out of there. So they couldn't put us on detail for Saturday night and Sunday. And came back Sunday afternoon.
So what'd you do in Philadelphia?
Went to a movie and went to a bar and drank this junk American beer.
Just wasn't the same, was it?
No.
That's the way Guinness is between here and Ireland. It's not the same. So I've got you getting out of the military on August the 20th of 58.
Right.
How'd you get home from Fort Dix?
Flew.
Commercial or Army?
Commercial.
You
Flew
remember
to
what
Columbus.
airline?
Might have been United. And we had to stop from Philadelphia, we had to stop in Pittsburgh and then to Dayton. So they fed us from Philly to Pittsburgh, and then they fed us from Pittsburgh to Dayton. So we got 2 meals out of it anyway.
Not good. Back in those days, flying was a lot different than it is now.
Oh, yeah.
The meals were pretty good on the planes, weren't
Yeah.
they? How'd you get home from Dayton?
My wife-to-be come down and picked me up.
So did you correspond with her all the time you were in the military?
Oh, yes, I rode every day. She rode every day.
Really?
Unless I happened to be out on maneuvers and whatever, I would tell her, well, probably won't be able to till we get back. Too busy and whatever, and of course the mail wouldn't be that good out there, but.
Mm-hmm. So when you got back, what did you do? Did you wait to get a job and take some time? Or did you try to get a job right when you got home?
Well, I got home on Wednesday and got married on Sunday, and we went to Florida for our honeymoon and came back, and the manager, Jerry, said that you're more valuable to get a job someplace else than just working here anymore. So I worked for my uncle for a year and a half until my wife got pregnant, and one paycheck wasn't gonna make it with what I was making, so I went and got a job at Hobart Brothers in Troy, which they made generators and welders, mainly welders. They made a lot of power poles and whatever for the military during the war to recharge aircraft and generators.
Okay. Well, your wedding date was August the 24th, 58.
Yeah.
Happens to be my birthday, so congratulations on getting married on the 24th.
Okay, thank you.
So you started working at Hobart Brothers. What did you do at Hobart Brothers?
Well, I started a radio drill when I first started in there, probably 6-8 months. And they got slack and they sent me up to repair, to help repair welders when they come in and had been out used and whatever. I was there a week and they moved me into maintenance. I was in maintenance for a year and a half. They had started, Hobart Brothers was not one to lay people off. So if they got slack, they have them guys painting and whatever. So I never was on the paint gang. Then another fellow, when I was on maintenance in the morning, was back there moving their scaffolding around on the roof hangers and whatever, and he fell. By luck, he landed on their forge, duck above it, so it was metal, it was flexible. So he didn't hit straight on the cement floor, but it slid him down to it. Well, that ended the paint gang. So they found a job, put everybody back to work again.
Well, how did he survive? Was he all right?
Yeah, he was all right. He had bruised ribs for a while, but
It's a good thing he fell where he fell instead of going right straight to the concrete.
right.
So how long did you work for Hobart?
7 years, and
Did you quit or were you fired?
I quit.
Why did you quit?
Well, when I started there and when I went up in repair, there was one man in repair. And by 7 years later, the repairs was 25 guys in it, had a separate building for them. They started buying Japanese steel, and for what we were doing, grinding shafts and that, it was supposed to be cold roll, and they were using hot roll, and by the time they machine it, this thing that, so when you grind them down, you'd only be grinding on one side because they were so oblong.
Mm.
And got to the place on the bearing end, you didn't even have a halfway around ground. So I had a bunch of them sent back to welding, they had to weld them back up so we have enough surface to grind down to shove the bearings on. So I was just upset with the quality of what we were putting out, and I told them to give my resignation when I quit. They talked and tried to get me to stay, and I said, no, I'm not gonna stay with that type of material, so.
Yeah. Japanese steel wasn't what
Right.
you were used to.
No.
Where'd you go from Hobart?
Well, Val Decker planting, packing plant there in Pickwick. And they killed, slaughtered hogs and cattle. So I got in there, 5 of us started on Monday morning, and we all went back on the hog kill, and they put me flushing out intestines to put sausage in. The other 4 went back where the hog came out of the scalding tank, and they was seeing blood, and 2 hours later we had a break, and 2 of them went on home. Couldn't stand the blood.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of the next day, there's only 2 of us left, and the other one left. So they put me back on the hog kill, and I was pulling rosin. They dipped the heads of the hogs in rosin, black rosin, and you'd pull that off, and it was supposed to take the hair off their heads and that. Well, it worked all right except on the red hogs, and you couldn't even pull it off. But outside of that, you could just take hold of it and start, and it'd just fall off, and we would kill in the morning, and 4 hours in the morning, and in the afternoon we would cut up what we killed the day before, because they put it in a cooler, and then we would cut it out up the day before. And I was there 6 weeks. I was supposed to join the union in 30 days, and I didn't. They didn't ask me, and so I decided I better go someplace else.
What did you use to kill the hogs in the first place?
Well, they cut their throat.
Okay.
Actually, they tried to electrocute them right through there, between their eyes, and then they cut their throat. Well, some of them it didn't kill, but once they cut their throat and blood ran out, they died. So
Yeah.
beef, they would use a rifle, 22 rifle, to shoot them in the head.
Well, did you process beef as well as hogs?
I never did, but they would. The other
Okay.
part of the plant did.
Okay. So Val Decker's not in business anymore,
No,
is it?
no.
Where'd you go from Val Decker?
Well, there's a local plant there that made, what was it, pumps, sump pumps for military. I think they might have put them on ships, might have been tanks also, kind of government stuff. I worked there for 3 or 4 months, and
What was the name of the company? Do you remember that?
well, Pickwick pump, I think they called it then.
Okay.
Now it's a crane pump because the Otis Treon that owned it then, he passed, and his brother-in-law, both of them passed, and they sold it to Crane Pump now. They're still in business there in Pickwick. Then I went to Trojan Manufacturing down in Troy. And then from there I went into Hartzell's, and when I interviewed for the job, the personnel manager, he told me, he said, well, Holt Brothers had blackballed you. That's why you couldn't get in that place. So he said, I'm gonna hire you, but you're gonna have to start at the bottom of the line and work back up. I can't hire you in as what you were doing, Holt Brothers.
Well, do you know why you got blackballed?
Well, probably because what I said about their quality of their product at the time. So it probably was 4 or 5 years later, they sold out to Miller Electric. And they run it for maybe 4 or 5 years and closed it down. And so now the building, most all the factory part of it's all tore down and put a new hospital in there. So,
So did you take the job there at Hartzell?
yeah,
So you're at the bottom of the line. What are you doing at Hartzell?
well, the first week I drilled holes. And that just got me out. Well, then I would run the mill, I was still drilling, and they decided to put me on another machine with aluminum casting, which was kind of a mill type thing, which aviation, everything has to be perfect.
According to their specifications, right?
Oh yeah, and everything had to have a radius on it so it wouldn't crack. So they trained me on that machine, and then the guy in the blade department, foreman, was a neighbor of mine. I don't know why, but he wanted me to come in and see if I could help them figure out a different way of holding them blades when they machined them on a lathe. I went in a couple of days, 4 hours in the afternoon, and to work with the guy and trying to figure it out. And of course, the blades coming out of the foundry was never even. So it was pretty hard to set anything up because of the variation. So wasn't able to do anything there. And so that was 10 hours a day, so I'd work, or nights, so I'd work 6 hours at night down in the machine shop. And then every once in a while they'd send me back up there to figure out the problem they had on the machine, and got that figured out for them. And kind of had me running any fryer, and I really liked the job. I was there about 3 years.
Well, by that time, had you had your third child?
Yes, yes.
So you have 3 children.
Right.
Theodore?
Yeah, the oldest was in 60.
When was he born in 60?
May the 4th.
All right, and then you had another son?
Ralph Frederick Jr. He was
Born?
August the 25th
All right.
of 61.
Okay. And your third child?
With Crystal Ann, it was in October 17th of 63.
63. And Crystal's married now?
Yes.
And her last name?
Dalkey, Dahlke. I think it might be Pollock.
All right. So Theodore has one son, Ryan.
Right.
Where do they live?
In Holman, Wisconsin, next to La Crosse.
And Fred has 2 children.
Well, he got 3. His oldest one, Tabitha, is in North Carolina with her 2 boys next to her ex-husband, so he could see the boys. And then Neil is in Piquet with me. He's Filipino from his second wife. And then they adopted a girl from his wife's sister,
What's her name?
and that's Holly.
Holly?
So she's going to be a junior next year in high school.
Crystal has 4 children.
Right. Chris and his wife Amy, both of them are veterinarian for large animals. And Jeffrey and his friend Dale, and Zach and his girlfriend Jessica, and Nicole and her husband Brandon Oslet, I think it is. And they have a daughter, Clara. And Chris and Amy has 2 daughters, Leah and Liza.
Well, you got a good memory of all these names. So, did you do any farming during your post-military career?
Well, on the home place, we was farming. We had rented a place next door to us, which was 70 acres. Our farm was 120. And the farm next door was 80. We rented that, and then we farmed my grandparents with 120 acres. So we did all that. Of course, we also did a lot of custom work. So field choppers. They chop corn, so we filled corn and hay. So we'd fill silos in spring, put hay in the silos for the dairy farmers, and in the fall then we put corn in the silos. And you had a baler and a combine, so we'd combine oats and wheat during the summer and bale hay and straw.
Did you do that while you have these daytime and nighttime jobs?
Well, once I went to work, I didn't have to do no work on the farm. But by then we had bigger equipment. It didn't take all three of us. So.
Mm-hmm. Now I've got a note here that you were in Wisconsin.
Right.
What did you live in Wisconsin?
Yes, we bought a farm up there.
What stage of your life did you buy a farm in Wisconsin?
Well, what would it be? After I left Hartzell's, I worked the EDM, and the economy slowed down, and so they shut down, so I lost that job. And by farming, I had hogs, was raising hogs, fat hogs, and took a load up to stockyards and tormented the owner of the stockyard about driving a truck, and he said, if you can drive a truck, you got a job. So I done that for 4 years before we sold our farm in Ohio, and then we went to Wisconsin and bought a dairy farm up there.
Why did you pick Wisconsin?
Well, my wife's mother was from Wisconsin, so she thought that's where she wanted to go. So, if you're married, your wife rules the roost.
Oh, happy wife, happy life, right?
Yeah, that's right.
and was her mother still living then? Is that why she went to Wisconsin?
Yes, but she lived in Ohio.
What, her mother?
Yeah. Her mom met a guy up there. He was from Illinois, but he was working for his uncle when they had got out of high school, because her mother went to nurses training for 4 years with her sister. And so after she got done with that, they got married and moved to Ohio, and then Suzanne was born. They lived in Dayton. And when she was in the 4th grade, must have been 45, 46, something like that, they moved to the country south of Covington, but she went to Newton School, but got involved in organizations that we was in, and so that's how I met her, from those organizations.
Uh-huh. Well, where did you have a farm in Wisconsin, near what town?
They called it Spencer, which is 15 miles north of Marshfield. Marshfield is pretty much the center of Wisconsin. Is great in medical. I think today they might have 1,000 doctors in the clinic up there.
Hmm.
But see, Wisconsin is so spread out with big towns. Most of the towns is 800 to 1,000 people. So to get any size in them, they don't have many.
Uh-huh.
So the hospitals and that are all spread out, so where they do have one, they're large. So we were like 30 miles from the county seat, but they had a small hospital. Of course, Marshfield would only be in 15 mile away. For a hospital, that would be where we would go.
Uh-huh. So how big a farm did you have in Wisconsin?
Well, we started out with 150 and 250. And then we bought another 100. And after the kids got out of high school and went to college, and they're not going to come back and farm, it was too much for us to milk, so we sold everything and come back to farm.
So in that 350 acres, what did you raise?
Hell, a lot. But we milk cows. We were milking 60 cows. And
Really?
we were raising corn hay mostly.
All right.
We introduced soybeans at the time. They wasn't raising soybeans in that area because you only had about 90-day growing season. So you had to be careful what you picked. You planted an oat like 1st of May and you harvested middle of August, where in Ohio, oats would be coming off first week of July. So in August, middle of August, when the oats was ready, you would have fog until about 10 o'clock in the morning, so you couldn't run until afternoon, and by 5 o'clock it started getting heavy again, so you only had about a 5-hour period to harvest oats.
Well, how long were you in Wisconsin?
15 years.
How, let me take you back to Germany for a minute. How was the weather at the various stations that you were in Germany?
Well, it never really got cold. We had snow a couple times, soft snow, wet snow. So I'm thinking probably never got below 25 degrees.
Really? How about Wisconsin?
Well, no, that's a different story. In January, one January, it got down, it was 58 degrees at night when we went to bed Sunday night. By Monday morning, it was below freezing. Got down to 33, 32, and if it's a mile an hour wind, and chill factor was somewhere around 90.
Somewhere around
90
90.
below.
Oh, 90 below.
Yeah. And walking from the house to the barn, you walk slow. You had something over your mouth and face just to be able to see, but then that wasn't as cold as the implement dealer down the high. He was out in North Dakota at the same time, and he said it was 120 below out there. So I said, well, yeah, we was warm then.
I can't believe that.
But the worst thing is the barn would freeze over normal. And it had gotten so warm there that all the ice in the walls of the barn had all melted. Well, nothing was slowing that wind down, and so we went out there to milk, and there was frost on the tailheads of the cows. Of course, the cows was all in the barn and stanchions all night long. And, you know, we basically didn't have any running water in the barn because that had froze up. So we just milked the 4 or 5 cows that were the freshest. We knew we had to milk them. And then hopefully by evening, we'd get things all out to milk the rest of them. Well, yeah, by dark, the wind died down and the walls started freezing up, and then we got running water, and then we could milk all of them and clean everything up. But that was just one deal.
Mm-hmm. So, what caused you to leave Wisconsin?
Well, the kids didn't want to farm. They didn't want to milk cows, and it was too much for the 2 of us. So we decided to come back to Ohio.
Came back to Covington?
Yeah,
What did you do when you came back to Ohio?
went back to driving a truck over the road.
Was that when you were driving for Vantage?
Yes, I started with Vantage and drove there through a couple of years and found out of an outfit out in Millis, out of Wisconsin. They wasn't, Vantage was a reefer and food warehouse, and it got a pain to trying to get unloaded because everything was union, and of course, East Coast was worse than Midwest to try and get unloaded, and of course they had a competition. They would try and hold you up so you'd be late for your next appointment, so they would quit getting your stuff who you was hauling for. It was like competition with
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we were pretty much hauling for Kraft
cheese.
cheese and yogurt and all that other kind of stuff.
Now, is that when you were working for Vantage?
Yes,
Okay, and then Millis, was that Millis?
yes. And
They were out of Wisconsin?
They was out of Black River Falls, Wisconsin,
What were you hauling for them?
and they're basically a beer hauler. So we would be hauling most of the time with stuff for breweries, might be the glass for the bottles, the cans for the bottles, or the, of course, we would get aluminum out of Minster, Ohio, in a big, huge roll, maybe 3 rolls would be 45,000 pounds. And take them to a can plant that would be making
Aluminum cans?
aluminum cans and that.
So you're driving a flatbed for that.
No, that was a box.
Was that box?
We put them in there and we'd take 2x4s and nail them into the floor to keep them from moving. Because you had to spread them out a little bit.
How'd you get them in the truck? Tow motor?
Yeah, they loaded them
Uh-huh.
and they would unload them. So then you had to pull the spikes out to take them 2x4s up, so when you was loading something else.
So how long did you drive for Millis?
I drove that for 3 years.
Then what did you do?
Well, down local, there's Cargill there in Sydney opened up a soybean plant and started making soybean oil. And it goes in a tanker. So closer to home, I went to pulling a food grade tanker,
Who was that for?
store and haul out of Van Wert, Ohio,
Okay. How long did you work for Store and Haul?
till I retired. And so I was there, well, 12, 14 years, something like that.
So when did you finally retire?
In '02, and Mom had passed, and I had a third share of the family farm, so my wife and I bought my brother and sister out and sold our house in town and remodeled the farmhouse and moved out there. Was out there until a friend of ours passed away one Sunday morning, just like that, and I decided we need to get closer to the kids because they was all Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Guam. Fred was in Guam, so we moved to Minnesota for 3 years, and it was not a friendly place.
Now, what do you mean by that? Weather-wise or person-wise?
People.
Why were they not friendly?
Well, they said, we have enough family, we don't need any friends. So if you was an outsider, you was lost.
Uh-huh.
So your friends was other outsiders that happened to move in.
So where were you in Minnesota?
Glencoe, which is 50 miles west of the Twin Cities. Of course, they had a whole lot of casinos up there, about every 50 miles.
But the people there were not friendly towards you.
No.
So you couldn't put up with that, so you
No.
moved from there.
We come back to Ohio and bought a house there in Pickway in what they used to call Wrinkle Village. When they built that, was for retirees, and they would originally idea they would do all their lawn care and snow removal and dealing, and you would have to pay so much a month for that, but the people didn't want to do that. Of course, most of them was retired farmers moving in there. They'd do it themselves. So, so we lived there until she passed in,
When you say she, you're talking about Suzanne?
yes, in July 29th of 19.
Oh, so I'm sorry to hear that.
And so I bashed it for a while, and they started Garby Ridge. My sister was in Garby Ridge.
Where is that?
They're in Pickway, on the east side of Pickway.
Okay.
And they started I guess you call a housing project, which they call them cottages, with the 2-unit cottages, and both ends they're connected together, but there's like 1,200 square feet in each one, so the kids said they thought maybe I need to get over there because they're all a day away from home. If I get sick or whatever, at least I'd be closer to the nursing home help and whatever, so.
So how are you doing health-wise right now?
Well, I'm still alive, so
Well, we wouldn't be doing this
Yeah.
if you weren't.
I go to VA tomorrow, so I've been going to the VA once a year. And family doctor every 3 months, so. I got some health issues, but I guess at my maturity, probably doing all right.
Good. Now, Theodore or Fred, were they, either one of them in the military?
Fred was in the military, and he was in for 6 years.
Is he the one that was in Guam?
Yes,
Okay. What branch was he in?
he was in the Army, and then he ended up getting in Special Forces because he was a helicopter repairer.
Okay.
So, in Special Forces, the helicopter, he worked in backup at a SWAT team for the Los Angeles World Fair back when they had that. And so he was that, and he actually went to Saudi Arabia for the first Gulf War as a trainer to teach the military how to put sand shields on their helicopters, so put out all sand over in Iraq to keep the sand from sucking up them choppers from sucking that sand up in there.
Into the engines, huh?
In the engines and that. So that only lasted 4 days, but he had a contract for 6 months. Well, they paid him part of that and sent him home. He made good money, but it only lasted 6 months.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's, Jim, if you could, and my cameraman is Jim O'Donnell from Covington, Ohio, and you've known Jim for how long?
Well, ever since, too long. Ever since 51,
All right.
1951.
Now we got a picture here. You can see that okay? That's a picture of yourself, I'm imagining.
Yes,
Have any idea how old you were then?
19, basic training. It was even in the newspaper.
Oh, in the Covington paper?
Yeah,
I don't know, this is gonna be harder to see, I don't know, can you see that?
Where you at? Can't find it. I can't find it.
that's in Germany.
Hold down. I can't find it. Oh, there we are.
Got
Okay.
it?
I got it now.
Can you make it out?
Yeah.
Okay, this is in Germany, and do you know what base it was in Germany?
That had to be Schaffenburg.
What's the structure behind you?
That would be the barracks behind there.
That looks like high living.
Well, yeah, it was a 2-story
Brick?
barracks.
Brick?
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. That had been German military barracks when before the
During the
war.
war? Here's another one. And there's a tank in that picture, and the back of the picture says 62nd Tank Battalion,
Yeah,
Cobra King. What's that mean?
what they call that tank.
Okay, and that's in Germany.
Yes,
Same place?
probably. Well, that might have been in Kitzinger.
The barracks looks different,
Yeah,
so you think that was
yeah, because they were the tank outfit on there, so it had to have been Kitzinger.
And here's somebody in a truck. We'll talk about that as soon as Jim gets from in there. Okay, it's you and the multi-special. What's a multi-special?
We was guarding some type of special, I don't know if it was an atomic deal, whatever they brought over there. Never would open it up, and I always kept it in the box. And of course, I had a 50 caliber machine gun on the turret on the truck, so that was my truck. So that's what we used to guard it. We did that for 3 days, I think it was. So.
So what do you mean it was your truck? Is that the truck you were assigned to all
Yes,
the time?
Yes. That was the headquarters truck. Of course, it had the ring up there to put the caliber machine gun.
Now, we got your dog tag. And I note that there's a little indentation on one end of it. What was that for?
If you was killed in action, they would shove that in your mouth into your teeth. So the Corp would have an identification when they come out.
And what's this? That's in one of your pictures.
Well, that was the emblem on what we call the flying saucer, our dress hat. The Army had those.
And we got a small item here. I don't know if Jim can see that.
That was
It's got a little point on the top. What did you do with this?
that was a can opener for liquids, and you punch that into the can and
And it would open
then
up.
open the lid and you could drink out of it.
Here's one of your badges, buttons.
That was 9th Engineer Combat button.
And last one we'll do is this one. Same emblem that's on your hat.
Yeah,
And what does that mean?
U.S. Army.
No,
Well, that's the engineer,
that's the engineer button, right?
Yeah, that's the engineer button, yeah.
Same thing that's on your hat.
Yeah. That was the engineer.
Jim, do you have any questions you'd like to ask Ralph or bring out?
On the boat, when you went over to Germany and you volunteered to work in the galley, did you cook anything special?
Well, the only thing I really remember of cooking was potatoes, which was steamed, it wasn't greased.
Did you mash them?
No, no. Made some dessert and,
No, we're doing this interview at the Grimes and Missile Airport at the Champaign Airport Museum. And we have been fortunate to be able to do this on an off day Dan Dickerson is here with us. He's one of the movers and shakers here at the museum. Dan, do you have any questions you'd like to ask Ralph?
When you were in Germany, did you get to visit any of the sites of the concentration camps?
No, we didn't. They was too far away from where I was stationed.
In any of the towns you were near, did you see any remnants of the Second World War?
Oh, yes, quite a bit. And of course, in Schaffenburg, there was a furniture store downtown that you could see all the brick building where the bullets, I suppose the aircraft shot bullets in it. You could see them be holed up that they left in there. And then also where we trained at Wildflicken, that was a stronghold for Hitler, and they had, we call them pillboxes, which is 3-foot cement walls all around it and 3-foot lid on top of it. And they just had a slot about 3 feet long, maybe at the most 6 inches wide, so they could
6
shoot
inches
out.
tall?
Yeah, but the door was on the end. They were set back up into a wall, and the rebar in there, some of the rods was at least an inch or inch and a half that he had. Of course, Hitler spent what, 20, 40 years getting all ready for war and that. So this was going to be like their last stand, I assume. But they wasn't tore up, which our tank outfit used them for target practice with their big guns and that. But they wasn't tearing them up either, so.
They were so thick and so
Oh, yeah.
strong?
Yeah.
What kind of tank guns were, what millimeter were firing at them?
Well, I don't know that much about the tank. When I was in the National Guard, we had a 105 Hauser, but whether that was the same size they had on them tanks or not, or they had the Avram tanks there, which was the only thing I know about tanks. It had 7 wheels on each side, so that was the big one at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But we seen a couple times where the tank and tank driver carrying on whatever, and one of them caught on fire and burnt the rubber tires off the side, and it was sitting in the middle of the road when we, so they had to haul it off so we could fix the road. But
Did the tank crew survive the fire? You know?
apparently they did. We never heard anything about that. We did lose Operation Saberhawk, which was a 72-hour deal where we built a pontoon bridge across a small creek, and it was joint with Air Force and engineers and cavalry. So we're up in it cold and rainy at night and whatever, and one of the guys crawled up on the back of the tank too close to the exhaust and got asphyxiated and died trying to keep warm.
Oh, jeez.
But outside of that, of course, then when we was ready to cross, the Air Force came in and had a couple of fighters, and they made a pass over 2 or 3 times, and the tanks went across the bridge, and then we pulled the bridge back up and went home.
Mm-hmm. That's too bad about the fellow that
Can I
tried
ask
to
you a
keep
question?
warm.
You said you were in the National Guard?
Yes.
What unit? Where at?
I don't know,
Yeah,
Jim.
Pickway.
Jim, did you pick the question up? All right?
Yes.
Okay.
So you were in the artillery unit there?
Yes, yeah, Pickway.
Okay, so was I.
But I don't know if they're still there yet.
Yes, they are. They were 105, like you said, and then they converted over to 155 self-propelled, but now they're back to 105 towed. But there are 2 units in that building. There's a transportation unit.
Yeah,
and
I
an
know the
artillery unit.
transportation's in there.
Yeah.
But they would connect it with the one in Covington?
Well, they were in the, at that time, I don't know now, but it was part of the 38th Division, which was Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan.
So I know when we went to Sandusky for training, 2 weeks training, Covington unit was up there too. And of course, in the Guards, I end up in communications or telephone or whatever. So up there in our training, I ended up in the radio, trailer, run the telephone in there.
You say
For all the
Sandusky, are you talking about Camp Perry?
Yeah,
Camp Perry, on Lake Erie?
yeah. We did the last day. I said, well, I'd like to go out and, of course, I'm in the trailer all the time. I'd like to go out and see them firing well. Them boys were used to cranking and detonating, ready to shoot us off and that. So, okay, you get on the seat and you guard it. Well, after about 3 shots, we finally hit it and knocked one down. I think it was the only one we had the whole 2 weeks we was up there.
With, what were you shooting with?
I sat on the seat to,
But what was it, what gun was it?
well, a 105 Hauser.
Artillery?
Yeah. They had a little small airplane, RCAT, they call it, flight around. That's what's supposed to be your target. So we're shooting out over the lake.
How long were you in the reserves?
A year because of my work. Then, being married, I couldn't always get off to go to the meetings because working 10, 12, and of course during harvest time, I'd be working from 5 till midnight. So I was able to get out after a year in the garden.
Is there anything that you want to put on this interview that we haven't talked about? Some experience you had in the States or in Germany or with the family? I'm sorry, your wife passed away. What did she have cancer or heart problems or what?
Well, I'm not real sure. Of course, she had heart surgery 10 years before, and well, of course, they said in her death certificate she had type 2 diabetes, but she had been in the hospital a month before with what the heck they did call it now, but she got her hearing and that messed up. She couldn't, well, she fell in the bathroom. So and heard her face, so I rushed her to the hospital, and so after the 3rd day, a guy come in and lined her head up and whatever and told her to look at him, and he did something, whatever, and got the crystals. He said the crystals in your ear
Right.
and got hooked together, and that released him, so she was all right. And so almost a month to the day later, she wasn't feeling good and whatever, and I went outside and did something out in the yard and came back in, and she was sitting on the floor in the middle of the living room, and I said, well, did you fall? No, I didn't fall, but my legs got weak, and she went to the bathroom and couldn't get back to her chair, so I got her over the chair and I couldn't pick her up. I got the neighbor to help me pick her up, and we got her in the chair, and I called the doctor and to get her down there, and she said, well, I can't go to the hospital because I was just there a month ago. Well, you go to the doctor. So I got into the doctor at the end of his regular day. with his patients and took her down there, and he said, well, send her over to the hospital and we'll find out what's wrong. And that was on a Tuesday, and Sunday night she passed. Sunday her kidneys had shut down, and she said, well, I guess I'll go on dialysis and that. So she didn't seem to be, and she seemed to be getting her strength back, which was probably a warning at the end, was closer than, because she was so weak. She couldn't even raise her legs up in bed over 2 inches off the bed. She was so weak. Sunday afternoon, well, she could bend her legs, she could raise them up and everything else. And she gave me a real good smile when I went home that evening. And a little bit before, the nurse called me and said she wasn't doing too good. And of course, I just got to bed and couldn't get the cobwebs out of my head, and I was going to lay back, and I decided, no, I shouldn't do that, because I go to sleep, so I'm getting ready. And just as I was walking out the door, she called again, and she said, are you coming? I said, I'm on my way, and I'm only 5 miles to the hospital, I guess, 6. And so coming out the highway, and I said, well, don't see how fast you can get there and have an accident. And so coming out of Pickway, and there's a dip on Washington Road, and just as I came down over that, well, there was a duck and a chicken and a coon and a possum
In the roadway.
and a skunk. Kind of remember, what was it? One of the movies with all the animals running around out there. So I was only going about 35 miles an hour. At least the skunk got out of my way and didn't run over him. And by the time I got there, of course, I parked by the emergency, and she was on the 2nd floor, and 2 doors before I got to the room, the nurse met me there and told me she was gone.
That's too bad. Once the kids got raised and out of the house, did she work, did she have any jobs outside the home?
No, that was kind of a deal before we got married. She said if we had any kids, she was gonna stay home and take care of the kids, because her mother had to go to work when she was born. So she always had a nanny and that. And I said, okay, but then we may not have a bunch of luxuries as long as we have food to eat. Why, you would just have to understand that. So she never went back to work until we bought the farm up in West Austin. She had to help milk cows and do farm work then, but at least she was home.
Okay.
And then when we moved back, she at tax time, middle of January to April 15th, she would reception at the tax office.
For who?
Well, H&R Block first, and then the last one was Wyatt and Silver.
Were they in Pickwick?
Yes, and both of them was in Pickwick.
How many years did she do that?
Well, she must have done that 6, 7 years.
And I forget when you told me she died, but you got married in 58. So you guys must have been married over 50 years.
Was just almost 26 days from being 61.
So almost 61 years.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I think that ends our interview. I want to thank you, first of all, for your service, and
Well,
thank you again
Thank
for your interview. Very
Well, thank
interesting. Thank you.